Okay, welcome to chapter 1. So what you see behind me is the publisher's PowerPoint, and I will go through some of the concepts in the chapter. Some places I'll stop and I may elaborate on some other things, and I may insert some material. There'll be some parts of the chapter I'll go through relatively quickly, and overall my presentation, my lectures, these online video lectures are going to be a bit fast, because I know that you can stop and rewind as you have need. So otherwise these things go on forever, and that's no fun. So chapter 1. Chapter 1 covers a lot of things that you would expect it to cover. It talks about some of this notion of global interdependence, the idea of globalism, and how we need other cultures. We are not living in isolation. It talks about some definitions, which is what you would expect in the first chapter of a book. Venturing into a new culture, things you might expect as you embark on intercultural encounters. Some discussion of ethics and some challenges that are a part of studying intercultural communication. Next is a discussion on this interconnected global community. Earlier in the module, you found some information on Martin and Nakayama's 6 imperatives, 6 reasons why it was critically important for us to study, to be familiar with, to grow in our knowledge of intercultural communication. This list here is very similar to Martin and Nakayama's list. So we have 6 areas that intercultural communication impacts your life, and you can take a look at those. I think the book is pretty self-explanatory on this level. So this idea of a global community, how does that affect things, and why does it exist? Well, certainly in today's era, because of business ventures, a product of international mergers, international business, the fact that we engage in trade and commerce back and forth has certainly increased the encounters of an intercultural nature. Technology, the expansion of technology, whether it's creating phone lines that can cross the Atlantic, whether it's a digital expansion that have allowed us to have Skype meetings with a corporate office that's located in a city in Germany. Whether it's the fact that for vacation you can choose to spend a spring break, a Christmas, a summer in another country. So certainly because of all these things, we have more opportunities for intercultural encounters. So you'll see these all discussed in your chapter. Then it's not just what happens internationally, it's also what happens locally. We have a lot of intercultural communication opportunities within our own borders, and that's what is meant by the term domestic diversity. So certainly the U.S. Demographics have changed and are shifting. Many studies indicate that the prevailing demographic majority of a Caucasian male will be the minority within the next decade or two. So here you see a statistic that talks about the minorities representing the percentage of the U.S. population. That demographic is expected to grow and increase for a number of different reasons. There's also the discussion of an increase in age of a certain demographic in that age group. Where are these immigrants going, these new people? Many of them in years past, in decades past, when immigrants would come to the U.S., they typically stayed in the large cities. They stayed in areas surrounding the means of transportation, whether it was the bus station, the train station, the airport. Immigrants are now going to suburbs, so you're more likely to encounter them all over. And while the U.S. Media tends to put a negative focus on immigration, and also we did this quite a bit in the state of California, where anything from economic issues to an infestation on crops in our farming communities people will find a way to blame the immigrant. And your book makes a nice tribute, I think, in the chapter talking about the many benefits that immigrants have contributed to our state and our country and our economy. Technology, as stated before, has a tremendous influence on this. Whether it, like I had said before, whether it is in a large formal business setting that's engaging in dialogue with cohorts around the world, or whether it's a son reaching out to his mom back in Guatemala for an intimate conversation. So because of technology, because of the internet, because of our phones, we can engage in conversations around the world. And what's interesting is, notice the last bullet is, while technology is working to bring together and to bridge gaps, it's also creating a more polarized society. How is that happening? Groups are beginning to form digitally, around race. And so we're becoming more segregated. You'll have a Facebook group that is people of a particular philosophy, whether that is racial or whether that is theological or whether that is of some other bent. But basically it's allowed us to form groups that we don't cross over, we don't migrate, we don't bridge the walls of that particular group to come in contact with other people. So it's created this interesting polarization. Definitions. Several definitions that Chapter 1 exposes you to. It defines intercultural communication, defines the notion of dominant culture. With that definition, be aware that dominant does not imply better than. There's no value associated, but it is connected to power. And remember that power takes many different forms. There's monetary power, certainly there's physical power, there's legislative power. And so the dominant culture is typically the culture that is in power. Then we have this discussion of co-culture. In the past, we used the term subculture, but that's now considered to be a little bit, has a negative connotation, because subculture implies subjugate, something's inferior. So now we say co-culture. You have a lot of co-cultures you belong to. You might be a gamer. You are all a student. You are a male. You are a female. You have a religious culture. You have perhaps a hobby that you do. Maybe you're a snowboarder. Anything like that. Those would all be co-cultures. And then you have the definition of society. So regarding some challenges that we face interculturally, there are several. When we study intercultural communication, it's never quite as simple as we would think. There are a lot of factors that make a single individual a complex creature. And so therefore, anytime you make any study of a human, of a person, you're going to find a lot of complexity. And so no two people are ever the same. There are many factors that influence you. There are many factors that influence me. And culture is one of those influences. It is not all you are. You are more than your culture. We will make many generalizations in this course. That's what we do. These generalizations are legitimate. They are research substantiated. They are cultural norms. All right. So if we say that, for example, the United States is highly collectivistic, there is a tremendous amount of research that supports the fact that the U.S. tends to be focused on the individual. That does not mean there isn't a single person in this country who doesn't fall in the category of collectivistic or is not individualistic. So it's important that you realize that these are generalizations, they are norms, but they are not absolutes. And then we have the discussion of objectivity. Is true objectivity even allowed? Is it even possible? I shouldn't say allowed. Is it possible? No. You did the exercise about the classroom and that phrase that was uttered by somebody who observed a classroom, and their own bias influenced what they saw and influenced their interpretation. The same with mine. I will do my best to be objective. I will do my best to be unbiased in my presentation of intercultural communication. I guarantee it. I guarantee I'll fail. Okay? My view will be influenced by the fact that I am an Irish American mom in her 50s, professor, comes from a Christian background. My own experiences, everything that make up me, who I am, has the potential to influence my communication, and everything that I want to say, understand, teach, communicate with you is going to be affected by that. You are affected by your own culture too, in ways that you do not even yet begin to understand. And at the end of the course, you might have a taste of how much influence your culture has on you. But for now, we are almost 11 minutes, so I'm going to stop this, and I wish you well, and I'll see you online.